Okay, so I'm going to show you my method for changing the coolant and flushing everything through to make sure you do it right first time. And so we'll start with the absolute basics, which is it's got to be a cold engine first of all, so you see the temperature gauge there. Never do it on anything other than a cold engine. So we've got that, and then the first bit of basic information that we need is how big the cooling system is. I'm actually doing it on this Volvo D5 diesel, which has an 8 litre capacity, but to be honest, this system or this method will work for pretty much every car, so hopefully you'll find it useful. Right, we'll go outside and move on to the next step. Okay, so the next job is to locate the coolant reservoir. I've just moved the power steering reservoir just out the way there, just so I can see things a little bit better. You need to slowly release the cap. Now I'm going to look at the level. Now on here you've got a minimum reading just there, if you can see that, and then there's a maximum just there. So the maximum is just up to the seam, just there. Now it's actually a tiny bit low, so I'm just going to top it up just with a bit of tap water from a hose. I'll explain about how using tap water is absolutely fine for this part of it. You don't use it for the final part, but don't be worrying about a tiny bit of tap water. In fact, we're going to be using quite a bit, so I'll wait for the comments on that. Okay, so we're now at the maximum, so we've got 8 litres in the system for definite, and the next thing now is to drain the system. So I need to remove this splash guard. The actual drain plug is just inside there, but I prefer to get better access just by taking off 2 10mm bolts, which are located, there's one there and one corresponding on the other side. Okay, so I've got the guard off now. So here's the drain plug. Going to loosen it off with a 13mm, and then I'm going to get my catch pan underneath it and start catching the coolant. Just speed things up by unscrewing it more. There we go. And I'll just leave that drain in now. Okay, so we've managed to get just under 6 out of the 8 litres in there. And so I'm now going to drain the engine block on this car. Some cars don't have an engine block drain, so that depends on your design. Okay, so on this car we've got the oil cooler at the back of the engine block attached to the sump, and if you follow the coolant pipe, see that gold fit in there, that's the drain for the engine block. So it's all the same coolant, but it can get trapped in there, and that's why we've not got as much out just from draining the radiator. Okay, so poured the drained engine coolant into there as well, so there we go. So we've got 7 litres, so there's still a litre knocking around in there somewhere, so that's why I wanted to measure how much I get out, because I'll then show you how to do the mix correctly afterwards. Right, let's get on with flushing. So the radiator drain plugs back in and the engine drain plugs back in, so I'm just going to refill the system now, just with tap water from this hose. Okay, so with the heater on full, car's in neutral, I'm just going to start the engine. I'm leaving this cap off as well. I'm just going to run the engine for 1 minute, and all this is going to do is swish out any excess coolant in the heater pipes, and that's knocking around the engine block. So you just may as well use the power of the engine and the water pump in order to do that. Like I say, don't worry about tap water being in the system, because we're then going to do, after we've done all the cold flushing with the hose pipe, we're then going to do a hot flush using distilled water. Okay, so all I'm going to do now is just drain the water that we've just flushed through the engine. And whilst that's draining, I'm also going to run the hose pipe through until this comes out clear, because it's still got a bit of a coolant tinge to it, as you can see just there. So we'll just run the hose pipe till it's clear. The other reason for running the hose pipe is that because the engine was running for a minute, even though it wouldn't have really got up to temperature, well, it wouldn't have got anywhere close to temperature, it just helps the engine block cool down, so it's got otherwise if you just drain the flushed water through, the engine block would have no cooling properties. So you just keep the hose going, keep the reservoir full, and you just keep draining until it runs clear. Okay, so we've got nice clear water coming out now, and you can see it's really diluted down the dregs of the old coolant, so that's good. So there's just one more flush to do now, and I'll show you how to do that. I'm actually going to give the coolant bottle a clean up as well, outside and inside. So I'm just going to take off the return hose there and the feed hose down there, and I'm also going to run tap water through the feed hose with the radiator drain plug back in. So the only way out then is coming out of this return hose, so that will give that hose a flush through as well. Otherwise it doesn't really get a chance to have high pressure water going through it, so it can get a little bit gunked up, and because it's only very small in diameter, they can get blocked quite easily. So it's just like an extra thing that I like to do, just to clean things up. Okay, so I've got the coolant bottle off, and this is why I like to get it off, just give it, so I can kind of get a brush in there and just give it a little swill around, clean up the outside, and you can see on the feed pipe there as well, it's all a little bit gonky, so let's get it all sorted out. I had to just pop off the coolant level sensor, which is just there, that goes under there. So what I've got is the return line going into this bottle here. There's the feed line just there, and I'm just going to force water into there, and because it has literally nowhere to go other than out of here, it'll flush through that way. Okay, see, and this is why I do this as well, because once again, even though we've had it running clear from lots of other pipes, you can still see it still has a tinge of coolant in there, still not completely clear. So that's why you just go through every other pipe just again, and you can also see just a few, I don't know whether you can see just a few little bits of debris going around there. So it's always best, if you've got access to the pipes and you've got a hose pipe, you may as well just flush as many pipes as possible, and I'll be doing the radiator forwards and backwards as well. Okay, so it's time to flush the radiator now, so I'm going to take off this top hose here, and then underneath I'll be removing the bottom hose, just undone the union there and levering the pipe off there. I'll be forwards and backwards flushing the radiator. Okay, so I've got a nice wide container under there, and I'm going to start flushing this. Once again, doesn't matter how many flushes have we done now, and yet forcing pressure through the radiator, we're still getting coolant coming out. So this is why all these flushes are so important, to give yourself a nice clean base, and then when the new coolant goes in, it's able to do its job perfectly. It's like having a really good oil drain, and it means that your new coolant will last for years and years. Then I'll be putting the hose pipe into the radiator just there and catching what comes out by backward flushing up in the engine bay. There we go, so a bit of backward flushing as well, just getting odd little bits of sediment and still that coolant colour, so I'll just keep doing that till it runs clear. So that's all the flushing done now, so it's time to put everything back together. So radiator bottom hose, obviously just make sure your drain plug is done up there, and then obviously radiator top hose, and I'll be refitting the coolant reservoir the right way around, putting on the return hose, putting the level sensor back in the bottom, and putting on the feed hose, connecting that to the bottom. I'm focusing on there, a lot of shadows today. Yeah, and then we're going to do then a hot flush, which is just basically putting 8 litres of distilled water into the system and taking it for a drive. Okay, so it's time to put the distilled water, or deionised water, whichever you want to call it. Just in case you're wondering, the one at the back, that's all my waste coolant, so I don't think that I've been having it flowing all over the place. I've gathered everything and that'll be recycled correctly. So I'm just going to put the full 8 litres up to the line of deionised water and get that into the car. Okay, so I'm going to pour the distilled water into here. All I've done, I've left the radiator top hose off. Although this car is a very easily burping system, some cars are a little bit more tricky, and so if you leave the radiator top hose off, because the radiator is filling from the bottom hose, this allows the air to escape, to allow it to burp easier, so you can get more water in first time around. So I'll just leave that out. And because I've left that out and the air can escape quicker, it just means you can pour it a lot faster as well. Okay, so now I can't get any more in through the expansion tank because the thermostat's leaking there. I'm just going to put the funnel into the top hose and pour some in there. So that's all I can get in for the time being, and so the expansion tank's full, so this is all distilled water, so I'm just going to tighten up the top hose, take the car for a drive and give the engine a hot flush now with 90-degree distilled water going round everywhere, and then it'll have its final drain. Okay, so I've been on the drive to do the hot flush with the distilled water. The engine's cooled down and we'll now get that drained out for the proper coolant change. It's worth noting though that when you go on your drive, you only have the heater on the full setting. You don't even need the fan on, you just have the heater controls on the full setting just to bleed any air out of the heater pipes, and that's literally for the first 1 minute, 2 minutes of the engine running. What you then need to do, because if you leave these on full, when you go on your drive, if your heater is as efficient as this Volvo, your coolant won't get up to temperature and your thermostat won't open and your system won't get flushed, so you've kind of wasted your time. So when you go on your drive, make sure you turn your heater setting right down. This will allow the coolant to reach temperature and for the thermostat to open, and also make sure your air conditioning is on. Make sure it's on, because that will also help heat up the engine and heat up the coolant. So just a little tip for you then, otherwise you're going to be wasting your time. Okay, so we're doing now the final drain of the distilled water. I've just hooked a tube up to the drain and it's going into this bottle here. Obviously got the radiator cap or the expansion cap off, and I'll show you what I'm going to do whilst this is happening. Whilst it's draining, I've got about 3 or 4 litres of distilled water that I'm just going to pour into the expansion, and this will give the final flush with distilled water, and that'll bring right down the concentration of tap water. So my best calculation is that I've got around, at worst, about 100 ml of tap water left in the system, which is that much in an entire cooling system, and that isn't going to make any difference whatsoever. So that's why it's okay to use tap water for flushing, as long as you've got enough distilled water. That barrel of distilled water, by the way, was £15 for 25 litres, so it's not expensive stuff. I certainly don't use bottled water or mineral water or anything like that. So I'll just leave the drain to finish off, and then I'll show you how to make the coolant mix properly. I also decided just to take off the bottom radiator hose just to see if there was anything left, and managed to get just a tiny bit more out there as well. So that's everything done. That's the state of the liquid inside. You're never going to get it absolutely crystal clear. That you can probably still see just the slightest hint of colour in there, but the main thing is now it's lovely and clean, and that's good enough for me now. So let's get this coolant mix done. Okay, so this is where it's very easy to go wrong with putting the coolant in and getting the mix incorrect. As we know, this particular system's got an 8 litre capacity, so that means for a 50-50 mix I need 4 litres of coolant and 4 litres of distilled water. Now, as you've seen, despite all the efforts, unless you dismantle everything, you're never going to get out all of the water. You might have a litre in there, you might have a litre and a half, and that's why you do the flush with distilled water, so that what's left in there is the correct type of water. So the important thing is to get all 4 litres or the full 50% of your coolant inside the engine. So I'm going to show you how I do that, and just basically all I'm going to do, I'm going to put a litre of this neat coolant in first of all, then I'm going to pour a litre of distilled water back into here, mix it up, and then I'll have a very, very strong pre-mix. So I'll have put 5 litres in initially, but the important thing is that the full 50% is going in of the coolant, and then all your topping up then is done using distilled water afterwards, and it might take a day, might take 2 days, but that's how you do it. Okay, so I'll put a litre of this in first. I'm pouring a litre of distilled water. It's on the cap and give it a good shake. And then I'll pour in the strong 4 litre mix. Now you'll notice as well, I've also taken off the return hose here. On this car it's connected to the radiator, so what that does is it allows easier burping of the system. So I'll get all of this in here, and then all you're topping up, like I say, is just with distilled water, and you don't need to worry about it then, because you know for certain that you've got the correct mix, because you've managed to get 50% of the concentrated coolant in there. Okay, so now we've got the coolant in, we go through the procedure again. Heater controls on full for around about 2 minutes, and then you should start to feel warmth in the heater pipes, and I'll show you that now. So on this car, these are the heater pipes just here, and you want to feel that you're getting warmth from both of them. As soon as you are, you know that the circulation's going okay and you're okay to go for a drive. Of course, it goes without saying to check all of the pipes that you've disconnected. Make sure you've got no drips or leaks or anything happening, anything untoward, so just double check all of your connections. So we've got heat coming through the pipes, so turn the temperature right down, make sure aircon's on, and take it for a drive. Okay, so the drive's completed, the thermostat open, that pipe's nice and hot, so that's had 90-degree coolant going through it. I think I ended up putting about 6 litres of fluid in total, which was the 4 litres of coolant and then 2 litres of distilled. I'm still way above the minimum, which is good, and just coming up to the maximum mark there. So all I'll do now is just drive the car normally, and basically check it when it's cold, check it each morning for 1 or 2 days. I'll keep the original coolant bottle, that's empty now, and I'll actually put distilled water into here, and then because coolant's quite thick and gloopy, it just means you can kind of rinse this out whilst adding your distilled water as well, and just check your level. And then after 1 day, 2 days maximum, checking it when it's cold, topping it up to maximum if necessary when it's cold. That's how you get your coolant sorted, flush, changed. And this original coolant lasted for 13 years, and there's no reason why this certainly won't be a job that I'll need to do again for another 5 to 10 years. So I hope you find that useful, and as always, thanks for watching.